Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope you're all doing well. It's another stuffy one here in Northern England. It's very humid. I don't like it. And again, I'm British. I don't like any weather. I don't like it at all. Okay, so as promised, we're here to talk about the re-indictment of Barry Morphew. The other day in a video over on MichelleAfterDark, I asked people whether you'd be interested in me continuing coverage of Barry Morphew, and some of you said yes, so I'm here to cover it. If you don't know anything about the case, though, don't worry, because the indictment that I'm going to read gives you quite a bit of background, so it's all going to get covered, so you'll be up to speed by the end of this live stream. The re-indictment came out a few days ago, so I am kind of behind on this. So if you've been following the case, you'll probably have read the indictment yourself, or you'll have heard at least one YouTuber reading out the indictment. I know quite a few people have, but I'm here to do it. And then as we continue, the case towards trial, if it actually gets to trial, then I'll do updates as and when they come along. So for those not familiar with the case, as I said, the indictment does provide some of that background. But just very briefly, Suzanne Morphew, Barry Morphew's wife, 49 years old, cancer survivor, went missing on Mother's Day in 2020. Barry was working away that day, the day that she disappeared. So conveniently, he's got an alibi. A year goes by and nothing's happened with the case. And then Barry Morphew, in May 2021, is arrested for murder. And it went on a few months. They got through preliminary hearings, they got through evidentiary hearings, it was heading towards trial. And then the prosecution put a motion in to dismiss the case. And the judge subsequently dismissed the case. So Barry was free, got out of jail, can't speak. He got a get out of jail free card. However, it wasn't a get out of jail free forever card, because that dismissal was without prejudice, which means that at some point in the future, the prosecution could refile charges. But we're 3 years down the line. That was in 2022. We're now June of 2025, and we're back. So Barry must have thought he was home and dry. Barry must have thought, oh, they've forgotten about me. I'm fine. I can just, live my life. If I'd been Barry, you know what? I'd have gone to live as a beach bum somewhere in a country that didn't have an extradition treaty. That's what I'd have done. I don't know about you. I mean, Barry's got a bit of money behind him. He could have afforded to do that, but he didn't. So when the indictment was dropped from a grand jury, the arrest warrant was issued, and Barry was subsequently arrested in Phoenix, of all places. So he's currently in jail in Arizona. Was it Phoenix? I think it was Phoenix. So he had an extradition hearing and he waived his right. So that means that he can be extradited back to Colorado. And they've got, I think, 30 days to extradite him back to Colorado. And that will be done if it's not been done so already. He may already be in Colorado. So that's where we're at. Now, the thing is, in the previous attempt to try this case, there was two things that went wrong for the prosecution. Firstly, the DA, who actually, Linda Stanley, she's been disbarred. She was disbarred. So there was a whole bunch of discovery violations. The judge, in trying to rectify the mess that the prosecution made, ended up saying that a bunch of expert witnesses that the prosecution planned to present material at the trial weren't allowed to do so, to try to rectify all of these violations that had happened. So the prosecution's case basically fell apart. The other problem the prosecution had at the time was that Suzanne's body had not been found. Her body had not been found. Remember, this is back in 2022. However, fast forward another year to September of 2023, and Suzanne's body was found in a very remote area in the opposite direction than anybody expected. And her body was found completely by accident when they were searching for another lost person, a missing person called Edna Quintana. Edna Quintana. And how's this for the universe striking a curveball here for us all? Oh, thank you, Krista. Thank you so much for $49.99. That's so kind of you. You're so generous. Thank you so much. The universe has given us a curveball because Edna Quintana remained missing. Suzanne Morphew was found, right? They found human remains roughly in the area where they expected Edna Quintana's remains to be, if indeed she was lost. When they found human remains, it wasn't Edna, it was Suzanne. There was actually someone else found as well. A man was found during the 2023 search for Edna Quintana. Then, just a few days ago, Edna Quintana's remains were found. How insane is this? What a coincidence. Like in this very same week that Barry's been re-indicted, Edna Quintana, the lady who was missing, whose search resulted in finding Suzanne, has finally been found after 2 years. And I do have an article here. I just quickly, because I remember doing a video about Edna Quintana when Suzanne's remains were found. You know, it was like 2 people have been found during the search for, this is Edna, and Edna herself remains missing. So a 55-year-old woman. And just a few days ago, a hiker found remains, and it has been confirmed that they are Edna's remains. So this is just a quick read here. So the remains of a woman who went missing in Colorado over 2 years ago have been found. Edna Quintana, 55, disappeared while rock hunting in the state in May 2023. The woman's remains were discovered by a hiker in a remote area. The remains of a woman who went missing over 2 years ago has been found. Edna Quintana initially went missing around May the 3rd, 2023, while rock hunting. I'm going to have to learn how to say this word, but I can't say it at the moment. Sagunch, it looks like Sagunch, but I know it's not Sagunch. I know it's not. But anyway, they released a statement on Friday, so just 2 days ago. The sheriff's office released a statement that the recent remains found by a hiker were those of Edna. So it was June 17th, so only a few days ago, a hiker discovered some human remains and contacted the police. Sheriff's office were called, deputies secured the scene, and they dispatched, the relevant authorities with cadaver dogs, presumably to pick up as many of the remains as they could. I would imagine that 2 years down the line, out in the open, those remains will have been scavenged. I know it's horrible, but they will have been scavenged. So the cadaver dogs are dispatched to try to find as many of the bones as they can, so they can autopsy, and it's going to take a while if they can at all confirm the cause and manner of death. So that's still ongoing in terms of Edna. So carefully recovered, transported to the El Paso County Coroner's Office for examination. There, they were positively identified as Quintana on June 25th. So June 25th, the ID, and then June 27th, just 2 days ago, that's when the Sheriff's Office released the statement that Edna finally has been found. Finally has been found. So the family has been informed, and at least now Edna could be laying to rest. Her family now have some level of closure. What happened to Edna still remains a mystery. Did she fall, get injured? Did she have a medical emergency? Was it foul play? We don't know any of that yet. We don't know any of that yet. But it's ironic that in the very same week that Barry was indicted, that Edna's body was finally found. So in an email to people, the CBI confirmed that an investigation into Quintana's death is ongoing. The organisation said that when the search for Quintana began in 2023, it led to the discovery of the remains of 2 other people. So Suzanne, as we know, in September of 2023. But previous to that, in the July, the remains of 26-year-old James Montoya was also found while they were looking for Edna. So anyhow, okay. So let's read this indictment. Sorry, I've not said hello to anybody. Hello, everybody. I'm not going to go back and say individual hellos. I've just launched straight into this and I've just forgotten about you. I'm sorry. But hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me. All right. So this is the indictment. And the new DA of the 12th Judicial District is Anne Kelly. She did a press conference when the indictment was made public and Barry was in custody. I'm not going to play it. She didn't really give us any information, really, thanking a bunch of people. And she seems very together. She seems very organised. She's relatively young. So hopefully they don't make the same mistakes again and end up with Barry going free. Now, look, Barry is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. But some of the things that Barry has said that we know about, because we do know quite a bit because of the first go around, because there was evidentiary hearings, there was all sorts of stuff. Now, the first go around, the court proceedings weren't televised. So that was annoying, but the judge was allowing reporters in the courtroom to tweet out and, contact the outside world. So you could basically sit on Twitter all day during one of these hearings and get a blow-by-blow account. So it wasn't quite Delphi level of secrecy. So a lot came out. We know a lot about this case already. So it was the prosecution that just completely ballsed it all up. But now they have more evidence because they've got Suzanne's body. So we're going to read this. It looks like it's 10 pages, but it actually isn't. It's more like 6 because there's some pages that don't have much on them. All right. So count 1, murder in the first degree. This is a grand jury indictment. On or about May 9th to May 10th, 2020, in our tribal, what that means, in the state of Colorado, Barry Morphew unlawfully, feloniously, after deliberation and with the intent to cause the death of a person other than himself, caused the death of Suzanne Morphew in violation with the law. Okay, so this is the probable cause. All right, so 5:46 p.m., May 10th, 2020, which was Mother's Day, Suzanne Morphew was reported missing to police by her neighbour. The last known person to see her alive was her husband, Barry Morphew. Right, well, her daughters, they had 2 daughters at the time. One, I think, was still in high school. One was at college. 2 girls, Mallory and Macy. They are stuck by Barry. They have done interviews with Barry once he was released the first time. So how they're feeling right now, I've no idea. They've not commented recently in any media that I know about. So they've been sticking by Barry. I personally believe Barry did it. I personally believe he did it based on some of the ridiculous things he said in the first go around. That, you know, in response to officers asking him why his phone was pinging all over their property, right? Well, they could track his phone moving all over their property. They're quite a large property, and, you know, worth more than $1 million. It was a nice property, and his phone, they could track it all going around all around his property. And he said that he was shooting chipmunks. Who shoots chipmunks? How do you shoot chipmunks? You know, you just splat them. So there's no such thing. There was no shooting of chipmunks. I mean, there's just some ridiculous things that Barry said. Leads me to believe he did it, but remains to be seen. But anyway, the evidence that they've got against him now, I think, is way more decisive than was in the first time, because they've got Suzanne's body now. And I think Suzanne's body is able to tell the story. Okay. Investigators responded to the Morphew residence at 19057 Puma Path near Salida, Colorado, to investigate the missing person report. The house was locked and Suzanne Morphew was not home. Her vehicle was in the garage. Her blank vehicle was in the garage. Okay. Her vehicle was in the garage. Her blank vehicle was in the garage. And don't know. I don't know. No sign of forced entry. And her bike was missing. So Suzanne liked to go on bike rides. So even though she'd beaten cancer, I think she was still having treatment, but she was winning. She was winning the cancer battle. And she was a fit 49-year-old. And she liked to go biking. So the first thing they thought was, you know, she's gone on a bike ride and she's injured herself. The reason why the neighbour contacted the police was because of Suzanne's daughters. Suzanne's daughters were on a camping trip that weekend. And because it was Mother's Day, they tried to get in touch with Suzanne because it was Mother's Day, and they'd not had a response from her. And it concerned them. So one of them contacted the neighbour to just go and check that Suzanne was okay. And there was no answer. So that's why the neighbour called the police. So the bike was missing. Later that evening, her bike was located down a hillside off a dirt road between her house and Highway 50. The bike was located less than a mile from the Morphew home. So this then instigated a big search. You know, they thought, well, the bike's down off the road, she's fallen off, she's crawled somewhere, maybe she's disoriented. So there was a huge search. Nothing was found. Nothing at all was found. And Barry said he thought she'd been got by a mountain lion. That was what Barry thought had happened. Okay, so he thought it was a mountain lion that did it. Okay, all right. On May 14th, 2020, her bike helmet was located 10 meters off the side of Highway 50, approximately 1.52 miles west of the Morphew home and approximately 0.84 miles west of where her bike was located. So things started to get suspicious then, that if Suzanne had fallen off her bike, the helmet would have been either on her head and be with Suzanne, or it would have come off, but it would be close to where the bike was found. But no, it wasn't. So, you know, the cops were getting suspicious. There were things that weren't quite adding up with this. But again, it did take them a year to arrest Barry the first time round. Barry Morphew was interviewed and told police that he'd set his alarm and woke up at 4:30 a.m. on May 10th, 2020. He told police he had left at 5 a.m. on May 10th for a pre-planned work trip to Broomfield, Colorado. So they lived in Salida. Broomfield is, you know, far drive away. So this was the Sunday, early Sunday, and he planned to get to Broomfield to start this job. And then the workers that he needed for this job was going to be following on behind, so the job could start properly on Monday. So that seemed to be a logical, pattern of events, given that Broomfield was a few hours drive away from Salida. Okay. He said that Suzanne was still asleep in bed when he left the house at 5 a.m. on May 10th. He told police she planned to ride her bike that day. Barry stated that upon arriving in Broomfield that morning, he checked into a hotel before leaving shortly after for the job site. But it was a Sunday. So in those, local ordinances in Broomfield didn't allow things like construction work to be going on Sundays, or anything that would create noise on Sundays. So why he'd gone to this job site on the Sunday seemed a bit strange, seemed a little bit off. The travel to there, fine, to start the job on Monday, but why would he need to set off so early on the Sunday morning? A bit weird, but, what he did on his way there and what he did when he got there tells a different story. Completely different story. We heard all about this the first go around. Okay, he told police that he received a call around 5 p.m. May 10th from his neighbour while physically at the Broomfield job site. Barry, you weren't there at 5 p.m. But anyway. The neighbours told Barry Morphew that his daughters were concerned because they could not reach Suzanne all day. Barry instructed the neighbours to check the house and specifically look for a bike. The neighbours reported to Barry that neither Suzanne nor the bike were at the house, and Barry then instructed them to call the sheriff. So conveniently, Barry was hours a drive away. That was very convenient, wasn't it? Very convenient. Police interviewed one of Barry's employees scheduled to assist him at the Broomfield job. The employee told law enforcement that the employee and Barry were not planning to leave for Broomfield until the evening hours of May 10th, which would have made more sense. Travel up Sunday evening, have a good night's sleep, and then start the job on Monday, because you're very limited on what you can do on a construction site on Sunday when the local ordinances don't allow you to do a right lot. You can't create any noise or anything like that. Well, we know construction sites are noisy, aren't they? They were supposed to drive together. Instead, Barry left without telling the employee. Barry just left in the early hours of the morning. Barry called the employee at approximately 11:18 a.m. and informed that employee that he had left without them. When the employee arrived in Broomfield on Sunday evening, the employee noticed that Barry Morphew had failed to bring the proper tools with him for the job, and the necessary materials for the job had not yet arrived at the job site. So Barry's turned up, supposedly there to, work all day on the Sunday, no tools, nothing. There's nothing ready to start this job. So Barry going early to get everything sorted, to get everything ready, was bullshit, absolute nonsense. But what he was doing, right, they were able to track him, and they were able to watch him and watch his behavior. And it was insane. It was insane. Review of the cameras at the hotel and nearby businesses revealed that Barry Morphew was in the Broomfield area for approximately 9 hours and 45 minutes. Of those hours, he spent less than half an hour, less than 30 minutes at the actual job site. So he wasn't there getting a handle on things. He wasn't there setting up so that they could start, really early on the Monday morning. That was nonsense. He'd laid himself out an alibi. And it was nonsense. Instead, besides 2 brief visits to the job site area, electronic evidence and cameras from the businesses showed him driving around to various locations and discarding unknown items in separate trash cans. Like, he stopped at one trash can and put some stuff in it. They weren't able to see the stuff he was putting in. Then he'd drive a bit, and then he'd go to a different trash can, and then he'd put some stuff in the hotel trash, and it was just nonsense, absolute silliness. Hotel footage then showed Barry arriving back at the hotel room and remaining inside the room from approximately 12:34 p.m. to 5:55 p.m. He was probably sleeping because he would have been up all night, probably discarding of Suzanne's remains, maybe. Who knows? Inconsistent with his statement to police, he was in the hotel, not at the job site, when he received the call about his wife, Suzanne Morphew, being unresponsive and missing. In early interviews with Barry Morphew, he told law enforcement that his marriage to Suzanne Morphew was the best and that the two had a wonderful weekend together. When Barry was asked whether Suzanne would say anything different about their relationship, Barry stated no, which again was a lie. Barry Morphew's statements about his marriage to Suzanne were inconsistent with other witnesses' accounts and evidence located. Specifically, investigators learned that Suzanne confided in people that she was unhappy in the marriage in the weeks and months leading up to her disappearance. She discussed plans to divorce Barry with her close friend. She maintained documented notes of problems in the relationship recovered from electronic devices and the physical search of the Morphew home. Suzanne had been having a secret affair. So she was having an affair with someone called Jeff, an old acquaintance who lived at estate. She communicated with him daily over LinkedIn and WhatsApp. Suzanne's last known electronic messages to anyone was to this person, Jeff, on May 9th, 2020 at 2:11 p.m., just 32 minutes before Barry Morphew returned home that day. Barry had gone out. Suzanne was in the house. She'd been communicating with Jeff, and Barry came home. I think Barry caught her. This is just my opinion. I think Barry caught her communicating with Jeff. Like, I don't know, maybe having some kind of sexy time thing going on, you know, online. Who knows? Who knows? But Barry knew that she wanted a divorce. He didn't know about the affair, allegedly. That's what Barry says. The reason why the affair was discovered was because Suzanne had got a spy pen. She got a pen, you know, that it's not an actual pen, it's a recording device, but it looks like a pen. And she was leaving that in like locations around the house and stuff to try to catch Barry out because she thought Barry was having an affair. But when cops investigated and they found this spy pen, what had been captured on the spy pen recordings was her on the phone with Jeff. So they were able, through Suzanne's communications, to piece together who she was having an affair with. They interviewed him. He lived at a estate with a family. Like, I think they were old school pals who'd, you know, got reacquainted like many years later. And, you know, Suzanne was planning to leave Barry. So I think Barry didn't want a divorce because it would have cost him a lot of money, and he's a controlling kind of dominant character, and it just wouldn't have gone down well. But Barry lied and said everything was great in the marriage, and he claims not to have known anything about the affair. Anyway, in an overall timeline of the week of Suzanne Morphew's disappearance, shows the disappearance coincided with her daughter, the only other occupant of the Morphew residence. So I can't remember who's the younger daughter. There's Mallory and Macy. I can't remember who's the older one who was at college at the time. Macy was still at home. And she was planning to, I think it was Macy, the younger one. I think Macy was the one that was still at home. But she was only planning to leave once the younger daughter had finished high school. I think she was like 16 or 17 at the time. But both daughters, they'd had this pre-planned camping weekend. That's the reason why there was no one in the house other than Suzanne and Barry that weekend. So it was very convenient for Barry to get rid of Suzanne that weekend when there was no one else there. Okay, so she left on a pre-planned road trip out of state. Because of this, Suzanne Morphew and Barry Morphew are expected to be alone at the residence starting on May 5th, 2020, until either late in the day, May 10th, or into May 11th. Suzanne drove blank, so that'll be the daughter, to Gunnison, Colorado on May 5th to depart with her sister and friend on the planned road trip. After May 5th, 2020, Barry Morphew and Suzanne Morphew were alone in the house. A forensic download of Barry Morphew's cell phone revealed that Barry had deleted a text chain with Suzanne from which an image of a single text remained. A screenshot of this single text message was saved on Barry Morphew's phone on May 6th. So he's deleted his text, but he saved a screenshot. This is bizarre. The image revealed a text from Suzanne that stated, "I'm done. I couldn't care less what you're up to and have been for years. We just need to figure this out civilly." So Barry knew that Suzanne wanted a divorce. He knew. But what he maybe didn't know about was the affair. Maybe finding out about the affair was the thing that tipped him over the edge. I don't know. That's just been something that I've speculated on over the years, because this has been going on for over 5 years. On May 11th, 2020, authorities commenced a search of the Morphew residence that spanned several days. The state of the residence and vehicles showed no signs of a break-in or intruder. Even with no signs of a break-in or intruder, law enforcement collected items of potential evidence and DNA swabs. DNA analysis of the swabs collected produced several DNA profile mixtures consistent with what would be expected in the common area of the home or a vehicle. The mixture of profiles were processed through offender databases and were compared to profiles of known individuals who may have been present in the vehicles or at the residence. The results did not lead to any stranger or intruder suspects. Now, one of the things that the DA hid, this was one of the discovery violations, she was hiding evidence of the DNA from the defense. This is what the defense claimed at the time, that there was DNA profiles from at least one other male in Suzanne's vehicle. And one of those males was apparently a sex offender. So the DA didn't want the defense to know about this, because obviously it would muddy the waters, it's exculpatory, and it would be a perfect opportunity for the defense to play the reasonable doubt card, quite rightly, right? So that was one of the discovery violations that resulted ultimately in Barry's charges being dismissed without prejudice in 2022. So an expert in DNA analysis testified that law enforcement provided an analyst with one of the partial profiles developed from the glove box of Suzanne Morphew's vehicle for further investigation using a keyboard search. This allowed for additional comparisons to profiles in more databases with less stringent quality control standards than the National DNA Index system, for the limited purpose of creating possible investigative leads. That expert further testified that there were matches to outside databases nationwide. The term matched used by DNA analysts does not mean identical. Rather, a match only means that there were other profiles that could not be excluded at the limited number of loci available from the partial profile for comparison. The expert explained she then compared the matches from those databases to the partial profiles from the mixture on the glove box and excluded those out-of-state profiles as not originating from the same contributor in all but 3 instances. So there's basically a bunch of mixed DNA. And the way that SDR testing happens is they take DNA segments from 20 places in the genome, and then they compare them with databases. So when you get a mixture of profiles, it creates a whole host of problems for working out exactly who these profiles might belong to. You don't sometimes know whether there's 2 mixed together or 3 mixed together. It becomes a real nightmare. And that was the situation that the first investigation found itself in. And instead of coming clean, the DA decided to basically botch her own investigation. It was only one of the things that went wrong. There was other things as well, but that was the biggie that went wrong. As I remember, I mean, it was 3 years ago. 3 years ago. I just remember it all going down. Okay, so these out-of-state profiles. But if you think about it, on a glove box, I mean, you know, somebody could have, like a mechanic, or if she went and had her car valeted at any point, you know, you're going to get possibly DNA, you know, touch DNA on the inside of a vehicle for loads of potential reasons. I would think a mechanic or a valeter, is that how you say it? A valet, is it? I don't know. You know, I don't know. She could have given someone a lift. But anyway. All right. Finally, the expert explained that just because the profiles from those databases matched at limited loci available for comparison, it did not mean that any of the people from the out-of-state profiles were the same person that contributed the partial profiles to the mixture on the glove box. Law enforcement investigated those 3 partial matches obtained from 3 separate out-of-state sources and found no connection to the case. So the people that they thought these profiles belonged to have now been investigated and ruled out. So they've got ahead of the game this time, and they've actually investigated presumably the sex offender that people were thinking potentially was the DNA, was one of these DNA matches. So they've done the work that should have been done the first time round. So that's good. That's good. All right, law enforcement located a locked gun safe in the garage during the search of the Morphew residence. Inside the gun safe, law enforcement located a dart rifle or tranquilizer rifle positioned towards the front of the safe. Law enforcement also found packages of Pnew dart brand tranquilizers. So tranquilizing darts that you shoot at animals to tranquilize them, in the gun safe. The package of darts included capped hypodermic needles inside of them, which were designed to load the darts. Law enforcement found one of these needle caps in the dryer after the dryer's contents were removed. So we've known all of this, like everything that has been said here so far, we're on page 4 at the moment, was found out. We knew all of this from the first do-over, except the DNA found in Suzanne's vehicle. We now know those people have been investigated and have been cleared. We didn't know that the first time, but we knew about the cap from the dart in the dryer. We knew about that, and that led to a bunch of speculation as to, was Barry chasing Suzanne? Did he tranquilize her using one of these animal darts? And without Suzanne's body, it was impossible to tell. It was just a speculation. But now they do have Suzanne's body, and Suzanne's body tells the story. So let's keep reading. Law enforcement also found men's shorts amongst the contents of the dryer that were removed prior to finding the needle cap. The shorts appeared consistent with the shorts Barry Morphew was seen on video wearing May 9th, less than 1 hour before he returned to the Morphew residence. He'd been out like doing some like shopping or something. He was caught on surveillance. So those shorts, he'd put those, he obviously washed them, put them in dryer or whatever. No tranquilizer formula was located during law enforcement's search of the home and vehicles. Police investigated numerous electronic devices and Suzanne Morphew's social media accounts, searching amongst other things for proof of life. That investigation revealed that Suzanne Morphew had not communicated electronically with any living person after 2:11 p.m. on May 9th, 2020, which is highly irregular. Remember, this was Mother's Day, and she'd not communicated with her daughters that day. She had like family. She had a brother and a sister that she communicated with regularly. She had friends. So for Suzanne to just go completely silent, just completely not like her at all. So any, idea that she's run away, she's just got fed up and she's run away, were discounted by family members, because that just wasn't something that Suzanne would have done. And she didn't, she didn't take anything. So if you're going to plan a new life, you at least take something, don't you? At least you might take your vehicle and maybe some clothes, but no, nothing was taken. Her last possible activity on any account protected by password access was 3:08 p.m. over 24 hours prior to her being reported missing. Records showing her typical use of electronics and social media demonstrated that this was inconsistent with her typical pattern of life in the days leading up to her disappearance. So they think that Barry was texting when Suzanne was already dead. Additionally, witnesses indicated they attempted to communicate with Suzanne throughout this time frame but received no response from her. These witnesses indicated her lack of response was out of the ordinary. Barry Morphew's electronic devices were also analysed. A download of the infotainment system on Barry's truck recovered telematics data showing the location and activity of his truck at certain times on May 9th and 10th. A download of Barry's cell phone showed additional location information. Based on data from his cell phone, Barry Morphew returned to the Morphew residence at 2:43 p.m. on May 9th. The data did not show his phone or truck leaving the residence again until the morning of May 10th. The download of Barry's cell phone registered events related to his phone. An expert forensic analyst, and that once this gets to trial, hopefully it gets to trial this time, hopefully. The phone data and the car data are going to be really interesting. Like, all of this was known the first time around, but back in 2022, 3 years ago, things that are used, programs and stuff that are used to analyze phones are better now. So they might be able to glean more information than they would have done in 2022. I don't know, maybe, possibly. Anyway, download of Barry's cell phone, right, blah, blah, blah. Determined that some of these events were in fact Barry Morphew's phone being turned off during the time frame of May 9th into May 10th. Turning off a cellular device effectively disables its ability to record location information. So turns off his phone. All right, so his phone goes completely dark for a period of time. Okay, Barry. All right. Specifically, the forensic analyst noted that Barry Morphew's phone download showed it was turned off at 2:47 p.m. on May 9th, only a few minutes after he arrived home. So convenient. I mean, he might say, oh, well, it just ran out of charge, maybe, and it turned off on its own, maybe. But the download of his phone would be able to tell whether the battery was down, whether the battery went, or whether it was actually a manual turn off. They'd be able to tell that. Only a few minutes after he arrived home at the residence where Suzanne Morphew sent her last electronic communication to anyone. At approximately 10:17 p.m. on May 9th, the phone was turned back on. So you're looking at, quite a few hours. The phone was turned back on. Barry's phone was again turned off at 4:32 a.m. on May 10th, prior to him leaving the residence for his trip to Broomfield. Convenient. And was not turned on again until 5:37 a.m. when location information showed him on the road already in the area of Johnson Village, Colorado. So, again, turns his phone off for an hour. What you doing, Barry, in that hour? What you doing? Testimony established that the times Barry Morphew turned off his phone corresponded to periods of time of significance in the case where location information was consequently unavailable. Okay. Similarly, further analysis of the information from Barry Morphew's infotainment system, the telematics, in his truck showed an irregular gap in recorded activities. Specifically, from approximately 3:49 a.m. To approximately 8:10 a.m. on May 10th, there was no recorded data registering on Barry's infotainment system. So he's turned it off. So that his truck can't be tracked. Who does that? Unless you're going like disposing of a body or something. Who does that? You might turn your phone off if you don't want to be disturbed, Or your phone might, just run out of battery and you don't realise for a few hours. Like that happens to me. My phone goes out of battery. I don't use my phone a lot. Oh, and there you go. My phone's dead. My phone's probably been dead for like 8 hours and I've not realised. But who turns off the infotainment system in their vehicle? Who does that? Who does that? An indication of no truck activity from telematics is inconsistent with other facts developed from Barry Morphew's phone's surveillance footage and Barry Morphew's statements about his activities on May 10th. Specifically, telematics data show Barry Morphew arrived at his residence at 2:43 p.m. on May 9th. It then registered various other activities throughout the afternoon at the residence until it ceased at 9:52 p.m. on May 9th. The telematics data then showed activities resume from 3:25 a.m. to 3:49 a.m. on May 10th at a GPS location consistent with his driveway. Barry Morphew reported to law enforcement that he was asleep during that time frame. Okay, yeah, you weren't. You were in your truck doing stuff. From 3:49 a.m. to 8:10 a.m. on May 10th, the infotainment system or telematics did not register any data, despite the fact that Barry Morphew's cell phone indicated the device was in Johnson's Village at 5:37 a.m. So his infotainment system was off when he turned his phone back on, and then the phone gave investigators his location. What a dweeb. What an idiot. What an idiot. Why did he turn his phone back on? What an absolute dweeb. Like, remember to turn his infotainment system off so that his car couldn't be tracked, but then turns his phone back on so they know where he is and they know he's actually travelling. Dear me, Barry. Dear me, Barry. And Barry reported being in his truck travelling to Broomfield at that time. When recorded telematics data became available again in the records from the infotainment system download at 8:10 a.m. on May 10th, corresponding GPS coordinates showed that Barry Morphew had already arrived in the area of Broomfield. So for his entire journey, he turned his infotainment system off. Another dumb criminal, yeah. I know. Like, he's had enough nous to do some of it, but then he's cocked it up. He's got too cocky, maybe. He's just not really. He's done a Brian Koberger. That he's got a lot right, but what he got wrong could well possibly nail him. And I know some people believe Barry's innocent. There are some people who believe he's innocent. I'm not one of them, personally. I'm not one of them. I don't buy the shooting chipmunks. I don't buy the fact that, his phone's off for a certain period of time and then turns back on. I don't buy that his infotainment system's off for a certain period of time and then miraculously turns back on. I don't buy the alibi in, Broomfield, him saying that he needed to go to this job site. I don't buy any of his story. I just don't buy it. Therefore, I'm going to say, because I don't buy it, I believe personally that he did it. Phone records for both Suzanne Morphew and Barry Morphew were analysed by expert investigators. The FBI CAS team analysed phone records for both Barry and Suzanne to determine location information and device usage related to their cell phones. In Suzanne Morphew's phone records, there was no indication of any user-initiated activity after the time Barry Morphew returned home at 2:43 p.m. on May 9th. Suzanne Morphew's cell phone device continued to connect through RTT data with the cell tower that services the Morphew home throughout the night of May 9th into the early morning of May 10th. These automated data connections, however, were consistent with the tower reaching out to the phone to determine its location and not initiated by the user of the device. After 4:23 a.m. on May 10th, Suzanne's phone ceased to connect at all, ever again. Just 8 minutes later, Barry Morphew's cell phone showed his phone ceased to connect starting at 4:31 a.m. So he's turned Suzanne's phone off when he's turned his phone off. Suzanne's cell phone never registered on any tower other than the tower consistent with the Morphew residence from the time Barry Morphew returned home at 2:43 on May 9th. To the time, it ceased activity altogether at 4:23 a.m. on May 10th. Remember, Barry said he was at home until 5 a.m. And when he was there, when he left, Suzanne was asleep. So her phone turning off at 4:23 a.m. when she was asleep, that's strange in itself, isn't it? Because the cops will know if that phone was off because it ran out of charge or because it was manually turned off. They will know that. Police interview people that knew Barry Morphew prior to his move from Indiana to Colorado in 2018. These witnesses told law enforcement that Barry Morphew was a deer farmer in Indiana. Several individuals told law enforcement that Barry Morphew used a specific tranquilizer called BAM to sedate and transport deer on his deer farm. Barry Morphew admitted to using BAM in both Indiana and Colorado. Specifically, he admitted to using BAM in Colorado as recently as April of 2020, stating that at that time he had to tranquilize deer from the breezeway of the Morphew residence. So Barry was an avid hunter. So, you know, he would hunt deer and shoot chipmunks and stuff like that, except he wasn't shooting chipmunks, but anyway. So he was a hunter. So the fact that he had this BAM for his deer farm in Indiana, when they moved to Colorado, he was still apparently using BAM to tranquilize deer. Okay. Then we get the finding of Suzanne's body. So this is all new. This is not this is a year down the line from Barry's charges being dismissed without prejudice. A whole year goes by, and then Suzanne's body's found. On September 22nd, 2023, human remains were found in and around a shallow clandestine grave in, near Highway 17, and basically in the middle of nowhere. The remains were found a few hundred feet down a dirt road off Highway 17. This location was less than an hour south of the Morphew residence by main highways. The remains were determined to be those of Suzanne Morphew. The majority of her bones were recovered. Many of the bones were significantly bleached. Along with Suzanne's bones, law enforcement recovered a cancer port and items of clothing, some of which were consistent with bike clothing Suzanne was known to wear. There was no visible perimortem trauma observed. But remember, these are skeletal remains. So perimortem means before death. So she didn't have any broken bones or anything like that. However, the bones were able to tell the story. A board-certified forensic anthropologist, a botanist, an entomologist, so an insect expert, all analysed the remains, and several observations were noted. And I find this absolutely fascinating. This is really interesting to me. This is the kind of stuff I really like. There was a distinct lack of bug activity, which was inconsistent with the remains having deposited or decomposed at this location. The clothing items lacked evidence of decomposition, which was inconsistent with Suzanne Morphew wearing the bike clothes at the time her body decomposed. Yeah, she had cancer. Yeah, she was a cancer survivor. She was still undergoing treatment, but she was winning. She was winning the fight. So the clothes that she was wearing weren't the clothes that she was wearing when the body decomposed. So it leads you, obviously, to believe that the body was moved and redressed. Additionally, there was a lack of animal predation on the bones. There was only a very small amount of desiccated soft tissues found on a few of the bones, and there was no hair mass located. So her hair was missing. Now, even though Suzanne had cancer, she did have hair. She did have her hair. So where was her hair? You know, an animal ain't going to just go off with every hair. So this body has been moved. This body has been moved and redressed, potentially. All the features that would have been expected if this had been the original grave site where decomposition occurred. So you would expect evidence of decomposition because it changes the soil. It changes the composition of the earth around it. So you get a different type of creature that will live in that area. And you know, the microscopic stuff that lives in that area, the insects that microscopic stuff attracts is different. So that's really interesting, isn't it? And of course, your hair doesn't decompose. I mean, eventually, I guess it will, but it doesn't decompose like tissue. So generally, skeletal remains that have, you know, been there for, 3 years, you're going to find the hair. You're going to find the hair. But no. So the body has been moved and no signs of animal predation. Now, if a body in the middle of nowhere is buried in a shallow grave, you guarantee that at some point those bones are going to be dug up. You know, you've got to bury them pretty deep for them not to be dug up by scavenging animals. And there's a bunch of wildlife out there that would predate. So no signs of animal predation at all. You know, the mountain lions that Barry says are out there. I don't know, like coyotes and stuff like that. Yeah, but no signs of animal predation. The forensic anthropologist opined that based on these factors, it was unlikely Suzanne decomposed from a fresh body to a skeleton at this location. The El Paso County Coroner's Office conducted an autopsy. Now, this is the killer. This, I think, will sink Barry. In addition to the standard toxicology testing, the coroner's office conducted additional toxicology testing at the request of law enforcement for the presence of a chemical mixture known as BAM, or the combination of, let's try to pronounce this, butorphanol, azaparone, and medetamine. We're just going to stick with BAM, but those are the 3 chemical compounds that make up BAM, which is used as an animal tranquilizer. Remember, Barry was a deer farmer. Barry had BAM. Barry admitted to using BAM on deer on his property. As you know, just a month before Suzanne went missing. So he had possession of BAM. Okay. The chief toxicologist tested Suzanne Morphew's bone marrow for the presence of BAM. All 3 of the individual chemicals that comprise BAM were present. And there's no way that a human being would have BAM in their body unless they've been shot with an animal tranquilizer dart. So all of the things that we were theorizing when that cap from a dart was found in the dryer along with Barry's shorts. So he's taken the cap off and put it in his pocket in his shorts, hasn't he? That's what he's done. So we were all theorizing that maybe his phone was, going in circles around his property because he was chasing Suzanne with the tranquilizer gun. And he's hit her, and he's probably chasing her because it takes a while for you to fall. It's not an instant, downing moment. It takes a little bit for it to kick in. How terrifying. That's absolutely terrifying. Additionally, the metabolite for butorphanol was present. So she was alive. She was alive long enough for the BAM, the B in the BAM, to start breaking down, because the metabolite is what you get in your body when you start to break certain compounds down. You get new compounds that happen when the body's metabolizing them. So she was alive for a while. She wasn't killed instantly. The presence of this B metabolite eliminated the possibility of post-mortem BAM contamination. So she was shot when she was alive. For that metabolism to happen, she was alive when she was shot, and she was alive for a while. It might have only been a relatively short while. I'm not talking about many hours necessarily, but she was alive long enough for that compound to make its way into her bone marrow and to start metabolizing. So for her liver to start metabolizing those compounds. The metabolite's presence also indicated that her death was not immediate following BAM exposure, because Suzanne Morphew's body had begun to metabolize the drug before she died. The coroner's office determined cause of death and manner of death as follows: homicide by unspecified means in the setting of BAM intoxication. Yeah, it is sick. It is sick. So Barry wasn't chasing and shooting chipmunks. He was chasing and shooting Suzanne with a tranquilizer gun. What on earth? What on earth? Imagine the fear of, you've been shot by this dart. And then we'll never know, unless he, comes clean. We're never going to know what he did after she was tranked. We're never going to know that, because there's no evidence on the bones. Like, what did he do? Did he keep her alive for a while? Did he torture her? Did he strangle her? We don't know. We don't know. A pharmacologist and medical doctor testified about the toxicology testing done to determine the presence of BAM in Suzanne's remains, about the chemical compound itself, and about the possible effects of that compound in humans. The expert explained that the toxicology testing done by the coroner's office met scientific standards of reliability and accuracy. He further testified that BAM is a chemical mixture of 3 specific compounds used as a tool for sedating animals for medical treatment or movement. Back in 2020 and the years leading up to Suzanne Morphew's disappearance, BAM was sold by only one company in the United States and could only be obtained by prescription from a veterinarian. So Barry could get prescriptions of BAM when he had his deer farm in Indiana, because if you've got large animals like that, you're farming large animals, then, a vet is going to prescribe BAM. Let's say you've got an injured animal that you need to transport somewhere, or you've got an animal kicking off or something, you're going to have those tranquilizers ready just in case. But it's a niche market, unless you're a zoo or a farmer of some kind, you're not going to be using BAM for your pet dog or your pet cat. It's when you're farming large animals that you can't transport sometimes, if unless they're sedated. Okay, so all right, where were we at? All right, BAM must be administered into the bloodstream through intravenous or intramuscular injection to be effective, as the skin and GI tract do not absorb it effectively. BAM does not cause sedation instantaneously, but takes several minutes to take effect. BAM is designed not to be lethal and comes with reversal agents in the prescription kit. However, BAM is not FDA approved for any human use. It's not like you're going to be taking it recreationally. It's not the kind of drug that you would take recreationally or anything like that, or Suzanne was taking it recreationally. I can hear some idiot fool saying that. I can hear Barry saying that. I could hear him saying that in an interview. Oh, yeah, she was abusing it. I wonder where all my BAM was going. She was abusing it. No, it's not the kind of drug that you're going to use to abuse. right? It's just not. A pharmacologist expert testified that the compound would render the recipient wholly immobile, vulnerable, and unable to resist any constrictions to the recipient's ability to breathe. But, you know, what effect it will have on humans, how long it will take to work on a human, we don't know. No scientific studies, because it's not a human drug. It's not something that a doctor would prescribe for a human, and it's not something that recreationally humans get their hands on to abuse. It's not a drug of abuse either. It's very niche. The only people who would have BAM are people who either work in zoos or work on farms, you know, like farm animals and things like that. They might have a prescription for BAM, especially when they're farming, you know, wild animals like deer. Anyway, records were obtained for BAM prescriptions related to Barry Morphew. Records were also obtained for BAM prescriptions to all persons within the counties and adjacent counties to where the Morphews lived and where Suzanne's remains were located. So a bunch of different counties where they looked at all prescriptions, like where are vets prescribing BAM to in this area. Those records showed that Barry Morphew obtained and filled several prescriptions for BAM while living in Indiana. Barry Morphew's last purchase of BAM by prescription was in March of 2018. Barry obtained multiple kits that each contained multiple doses just a few months before the Morphews moved to Colorado. So when he moved to Colorado, he was no longer a deer farmer, but he still had the BAM that he'd got on prescription while he was in Indiana, while he was a deer farmer in Indiana. But he was still using BAM because he would tranquilize deer with it. Records further showed that no other private citizens or private businesses in any of the surrounding counties had purchased BAM prescriptions from 2017 to 2020. So no one else, no other private citizen had filed a prescription for BAM in all the surrounding counties from 2017 onwards. Colorado Parks and Wildlife and the National Park Service were the only entities that received prescriptions of BAM in those counties from 2017 through 2020. That, in my opinion, is the sinker for Barry Morphew. That is incredibly persuasive. For a jury to hear that, incredibly persuasive. Like, who else would get their hands on BAM and would want to tranquilize Suzanne Morphew? You know, you could say, oh, well, it was a random person from, you know, the National Park Service, or a random person from a Colorado park who just happened to want to abduct Suzanne Morphew and tranquilized her. No. If you wanted to abduct someone, you're not going to tranquilize them with an animal dart. You're going to use a method that is, you know, you're sure is going to work. You're not going to use an animal dart unless you know you're not going to be disturbed and you know that it's your own home and you've got all the time in the world to, I don't know, chase them, torture them, do whatever with them once they were tranquilized. It's not the kind of drug an abductor would use. It's too unpredictable. So that's the sinker for Barry Morphew. In my humble opinion, that's the sinker. Suzanne's body told the story. Suzanne told the story. Investigators learned that each of these government entities enforce tight regulations to monitor the BAM prescriptions, storage and use. None of the BAM from these agencies was unaccounted for. There you go. So a random person from a Colorado park or a random person from the National Park Service didn't steal some dart so they could abduct a woman. Didn't happen. The only person who had BAM in the vicinity of Suzanne Morphew was Barry. Ultimately, the prescription records show that when Suzanne Morphew disappeared, only one private citizen living in the entire area of the state had access to BAM, Barry Morphew. All offences against the peace and dignity of the people of the state of Colorado. And then we've got all these like pages. So I think they've got a very strong case now. I think they do. I think they have a strong case now. Defendant information. Let's have a look. So white male, 5'10", 195 pounds, blonde hair, blue eyes, from Indiana. He's on a $3 million bond. $3 million bond hereby set and following amount. Cash only. Does he have $3 million in cash? $3 million cash only bond. No leaving the state of Colorado. GPS unit. Surrender of passport. Compliance with mandatory. Can't read that. Does he have $3 million? Look, he's got assets, but can he raise $3 million in cash? I doubt it. I doubt that he has $3 million. He was able to bond himself out last time, I think. Was he for a while? I'm not sure. Was he? Was he in jail the whole time? I can't remember. No, I think he was in jail the whole time, wasn't he? I don't remember. I don't remember the first time round. But yeah. So he is a flight risk. He is absolutely a flight risk. He did have a girlfriend, yes. What do the daughters think now? I don't know. I'd love to know. I'd love to know. Because the fact that Suzanne clearly was tranquilized and the fact that the only private citizen in the entire area of that state had possession of BAM was Barry, surely that will open their eyes. That has to open their eyes. You know, in the first case, it was circumstantial. You know, you had to put certain pieces together. There was holes in it. There was reasonable doubt. But now that Suzanne's body is able to tell that story and they've cleared those people that those DNA profiles from the glove box could have come from, I think the case is really strong now. I mean, if I was Barry, I'd seriously consider taking some kind of deal. I don't know what deal they give him. I don't even know they give him a deal because Colorado doesn't have the death penalty anymore. They used to, but I remember they got rid of the death penalty just before the Chris Watts case in 2018. So there's no death penalty. So it's going to be life without parole. I don't know that they could even do a deal with him. So I think we will go to trial. As long as the prosecutors don't cock it up again. I hope they don't cock it up again. But the previous DA, she was disbarred. So the new DA, Ann Kelly, it remains to be seen. I hope they televise things and then we can watch them. Hope they do. They didn't the first time round, but don't know what the judge is, who the judge is, how the judge will feel about this kind of thing. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting. So watch this space. Watch this space because Bobcat Barry, Chipmunk Barry, is he's in jail again. He's in jail again. He is where he belongs, in my opinion. Heard not televised. No. Are there dates yet? No, he was only indicted the other day. There was a hearing, which was shown, actually. I watched it on YouTube. Hold on. Let me see if I can find it. Barry Morphew. Hearing. I absolutely watched it. Here we go.
Information. Do you know what option you would like to do here today, sir?
To waive.
You'd like to waive your rights here today and go ahead and say you're ready for Colorado to pick you up? Okay.
This is a look inside the courtroom as Barry Morphew made his first court appearance in Arizona since being charged with murdering his wife.
I watched the whole hearing. I absolutely watched the whole hearing. It wasn't long. It was only a few minutes long. But this was televised, but this is Arizona. He was picked up in Arizona. So he's in jail in Arizona on $3 million bond. Colorado, he waived his rights to extradition, which means that Colorado are free to come and pick him up. So whenever they're ready to come and pick him up, they'll transport him to Colorado and he'll be in jail there, pending him paying $3 million cash bond.
Suzanne Morphew. This is his second time being charged for the murder. The first case was dropped in 2022. On Saturday, Morphew waived his right to an extradition hearing in Arizona. He's being held now without bond, and Colorado now has 30 days to pick him up. For a comprehensive timeline of this case.
All right. Let's see if we can find the whole hearing. I definitely watched the whole. I watched it all. I did. I absolutely did. Oh, that's when he got out the first time. I don't know. I don't know where it is now. I definitely watched it though. I swear down I watched it. It was only a few minutes long. Just Barry asking, being asked a bunch of questions and then waived his rights, asked if he fully understood his rights and blah, blah, blah. So that was that. Linda Stanley, yeah, that was the first year, yeah. Who got disbarred. All right, so we're up to date. We're up to date and we'll see. We'll see. But it's I do think it's a strong case and let's wait and see what the next move is. So once he's in Colorado, he'll be having, you know, various hearings. We don't know any of those dates yet. It's all got to be set. We don't even know who the judge is or anything. Don't know if he's going to use the same lawyers as he did last time. He had she was very good. Her name, what was her name? Iris Heaton, I think her name was. Iris Heaton or Iton. She was very good though. You know, he was able to pay for decent lawyers, so I assume he will again. But they have an uphill battle this time. They do. They have an uphill battle. All right, guys. Thank you for joining me. Thank you, as always, to the mods. And thank you very much to Krista, who gave $49.99 right at the beginning of the live stream. Very much appreciated. All right, I'm boiling in this little room. I'm going to go outside and get a bit cooler. All right, nice evening breeze or something, hopefully. All right, so I shall see you tomorrow. There'll be a video over on Michelle After Dark tomorrow morning, my time. I'll see you soon. Bye for now. Bye-bye.